A child goes missing. No scream, no blood, no witnesses. But what shocked the nation wasn't the disappearance. It was the name at the center of every clue. Her mother's boyfriend. A man who used to drive her to school, who had dinner with the family, who once said he'd protect her like a father. Then, as police peeled back each layer, data, surveillance footage, faint traces, the truth emerged. A chilling truth, hidden inside what should have been the safest home. Madeline Soto, known as Maddie, was a 13-year-old middle school student living in Orlando, Florida. Her friends and teachers described her as quiet, kind, studious, and very close with her mother. Maddie came from a single-parent household. After a divorce, her mother, Elizabeth Soto, worked multiple jobs to support her daughter. They lived in a modest apartment on Conway Road. In recent years, a man named Stephan Sterns, about 38 years old, entered their lives. He was Elizabeth's boyfriend, had worked as a security guard, and was described by many as reserved, quiet, and seemingly decent. Sterns frequently stayed at their apartment, occasionally slept over, and regularly drove Maddie to school. To outsiders, he seemed responsible, but what happened behind closed doors was something entirely different. On February 26, 2024, Maddie didn't show up at school. Her teacher contacted her mother, and an alert was issued immediately. According to Elizabeth, Maddie had left that morning with Stephan Sterns, but no one at the school ever saw her. Police began their investigation and reviewed security cameras at the apartment complex. As stated, Maddie was last seen leaving with Sterns around 7 a.m., but after that, she vanished. GPS data from Sterns' car revealed that he didn't follow the usual school route. Instead, he drove to a vacant lot nearly 10 miles from their home, where the signal went silent for almost an hour. When questioned, Sterns gave inconsistent stories, saying at one point that Maddie asked to be dropped off early, and at another time claiming he had driven her all the way to school. The data didn't match. Police became suspicious. That same day, officers obtained a search warrant for Sterns' apartment. There, they recovered gloves, duct tape, clothing with biological traces, and, critically, several electronic devices. Upon forensic analysis, authorities discovered multiple sensitive images and videos linked to Maddie. Specific details have not been disclosed due to legal and ethical reasons, but investigators confirmed there was enough evidence to charge Sterns with serious offenses involving a minor. The digital materials indicated that these acts were not impulsive, they were deliberate and organized. Some of the footage appeared to have been captured using hidden cameras placed in Maddie's private space. Devices also contained encrypted folders and software for concealing data, including connections to platforms known for illicit content distribution. Meanwhile, Maddie's friends and teachers said she had shown changes in behavior months before her disappearance. She became withdrawn, asked to change class schedules, and once told a friend she didn't feel safe riding with someone she knew. But she never gave a name, and no one raised alarm. Her mother, Elizabeth, later told investigators she hadn't noticed anything unusual. She trusted her boyfriend completely and never saw anything wrong. 3 days after Maddie went missing, her body was found in a wooded lot covered with branches and trash. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as strangulation. Her body showed signs of physical restraint before death, and the scene appeared staged to delay discovery and identification. Stephan Sterns was arrested immediately and charged. As of July 2025, he faces over 60 felony counts, including child sexual abuse, production and possession of illegal material, covert surveillance, and first-degree murder. The charges have been split into 2 separate trials. The abuse-related charges are being tried first. The murder trial is scheduled for September, and prosecutors have confirmed they will seek the death penalty. The case shook the Florida community. What outraged people wasn't just the crime, it was how the suspect had embedded himself into the victim's home, built trust, and manipulated his position over time. This wasn't an act of rage. It was a calculated pattern of control, deception, and exploitation. Criminologists referred to it as the crime of calm, committed not with force or threats, but with quiet access and absolute trust. Sterns had no prior criminal record. No one had reported him for suspicious behavior. He had a clean background, a somewhat stable work history, and had even worked at a school as a security contractor. But digital evidence, surveillance footage, and witness statements about Maddie's behavior now paint a much darker portrait of a man who thrived on power, secrecy, and the illusion of being harmless. The decision to separate the charges into two separate trials reflects a clear legal strategy from prosecutors. First, they will aim to prove the systematic abuse and irrefutable digital trail. Then, they'll use the surrounding circumstances of Maddie's death, including the scene, cover-up attempts, timing, and motive, to argue that her murder was premeditated and intentional.
On July 14 and 15, 2025, at the Orange County Courthouse in Florida, Stephan Sterns appeared for a pretrial hearing ahead of the formal proceedings related to his child sexual abuse charges. The focus of the hearing wasn't about proving guilt. It centered on courtroom procedures, how sensitive evidence would be presented, and how to handle materials considered emotionally disturbing. Yet through these procedural debates, more of the case's hidden details came to light via the records both the prosecution and defense were forced to disclose. From the outset, Sterns' attorney filed a motion asking that his client not be physically restrained during court appearances, arguing that being seen in handcuffs or shackles could unfairly bias the jury. The prosecution opposed the request, citing the gravity of the charges and potential flight risk, despite Sterns having no prior violent criminal history. After consideration, Judge Keith Karsten approved a compromise. Sterns would not wear traditional handcuffs or ankle shackles, but would instead be fitted with a leg brace, an orthopedic restraint device that locks the knee if sudden movement is detected. It prevents escape, but appears less punitive in front of jurors. This debate over restraint wasn't merely cosmetic. In highly sensitive cases like child abuse, how a defendant presents in court can significantly impact juror perception. The prosecution's willingness to compromise on visible restraints suggests a strategic effort to maintain a fair trial environment while still addressing security concerns, crucial groundwork before jury selection. A much more contentious issue was how to handle the digital evidence seized from Sterns' devices. According to prosecutors, his phone, external hard drives, memory cards, and tablet contained a large quantity of illicit materials, including content tied directly to Maddie and potentially other unidentified victims. Some files were encrypted with concealment software, indicating deliberate attempts to hide them. Digital forensics experts testified that the materials were retrieved legally, under valid warrants, and that chain of custody protocols were strictly followed. Crucially, some of the videos were reportedly recorded with hidden cameras placed in Maddie's private space. Others were downloaded or shared through anonymous accounts. While the specific content has not been and will not be released to the public, investigators described it as undeniable evidence of long-term systematic abuse. The core legal question: should these materials be shown publicly in court? Prosecutors argued that due to the graphic and emotionally damaging nature of the videos and images, they should only be shown privately to the judge and jurors, on restricted monitors or via closed sessions. The defense objected, claiming this would violate the principle of a public trial and could unfairly sway jurors without allowing open scrutiny. Another major defense strategy revolves around challenging the legality of how evidence was collected. Sterns' lawyers contended that seizing all of his devices and extracting full data sets without specific itemized warrants could be a violation of Fourth Amendment rights. They also raised concerns about whether digital evidence may have been altered or mishandled during forensic processing, and asked the court to suppress any data where chain of custody could be questioned. The prosecution countered with a detailed legal record, Every step of the digital forensics process was documented, conducted by certified specialists, and corroborated with independent data, such as GPS location tracking, browser history, surveillance footage, and file timestamps. They argued that even if a small portion of evidence were excluded for procedural reasons, there remained overwhelming and independent proof of criminal conduct. One particularly incriminating detail stood out. Just hours after Maddie disappeared, Sterns conducted online searches for terms such as how to permanently erase an iPhone, how to remove GPS trackers, and reset iPhone without password. These search queries were hidden in background caches and only discovered through advanced forensic tools. Prosecutors presented this as a clear indicator of guilt, intent to destroy evidence, and awareness of impending legal consequences. While these digital traces do not directly prove Maddie's murder, the murder trial is scheduled separately. They help build a psychological and behavioral profile of the accused. They suggest that Sterns didn't act impulsively, but planned, concealed, and attempted to erase every trace. Outside the courtroom, public interest in the case has surged. Advocacy groups across Florida and beyond continue to share hashtags like Justice for Maddie and No More Silence, demanding reform in how adults living with minors are screened and monitored. Some groups are pushing for legislation requiring background checks for any non-biological adult cohabitating with children. From a legal standpoint, the recent pretrial hearing is considered a key step in setting the stage for the next two trials. First, the abuse-related trial will test the strength and admissibility of digital evidence and witness credibility. Second, and more consequentially, will be the murder trial, where prosecutors plan to argue for the death penalty. The procedures, rulings, and legal groundwork laid this July will directly influence jury selection, admissibility, and overall trial strategy in the months ahead.
As the trial for the sexual abuse charges prepares to begin at the end of July 2025, another, more serious proceeding is quietly approaching: the first-degree murder case, where Stephan Sterns will face allegations that he killed Madeline Soto, a 13-year-old girl who once called him uncle. The trial is scheduled for September, and prosecutors have confirmed they will seek the highest penalty available under Florida law: the death sentence. Legally, this move is both rare and calculated. In recent years, prosecutors in Florida have exercised caution when pursuing capital punishment, particularly in cases involving mental health concerns or a lack of direct witnesses. But in the case of Stephan Sterns, the state attorney's office stated that they have sufficient grounds to argue that the murder was not only intentional, but carried out in a manner that was especially cruel, aimed at silencing the victim and erasing all evidence. Prosecutors are preparing to present several key points. The time of Maddie's death matches the window during which Sterns deviated from his normal route and stopped at a wooded area, where her body was later discovered. The cause of death was ruled as manual strangulation, a method requiring close, sustained contact and control. The scene was intentionally covered with brush and debris, clearly an attempt to delay discovery. Immediately afterward, Sterns conducted a series of internet searches and actions to wipe data, change passwords, and destroy digital evidence. All of these details, when viewed together, suggest a chain of behavior, from coercion to abuse to elimination of the victim to conceal prior crimes. While Sterns has exercised his right to remain silent and has made no confession, the combination of physical, digital, and circumstantial evidence appears to be tightening around him. Beyond the courtroom, this case has stirred broader concerns. It's not just about the alleged crimes. It's about how someone like Sterns was able to integrate himself into a household, gain trust, and exploit his position over time. He wasn't a stranger, a random intruder, or an unknown threat. He was inside the home. He was trusted. And that, more than anything, has made Maddie's death resonate deeply with the public as a symbol of betrayal in its most devastating form. Maddie's family, particularly her mother, Elizabeth Soto, has largely stayed out of the media spotlight. But early statements in court filings revealed a mother in shock, expressing guilt for not recognizing the signs. "I let him into our home. I thought he cared for my daughter. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself," she reportedly told investigators. With this emotional weight looming, legal experts believe the upcoming murder trial could be emotionally charged, requiring strict courtroom management to avoid undue influence on jurors. On the defense side, Sterns' attorneys have not yet publicly revealed their strategy. However, analysts suggest they may try to weaken the prosecution's timeline, highlight the lack of eyewitnesses, or attempt a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty. But with the current weight of evidence, including digital traces, GPS logs, and forensic links to the crime scene, the prosecution's position appears strong, especially if they can prove the murder was committed to prevent exposure of the abuse. Public interest in the case continues to grow. Advocacy groups are renewing calls for legislation requiring mandatory background checks for any adult living with minors, even if they are not biological parents or legal guardians. Some are pushing for increased oversight and reporting mechanisms in schools and social services, citing Maddie's case as an example of warning signs that went unnoticed or unacted upon. Legally, the case against Stephan Sterns remains in the middle of the judicial process. No verdict has been rendered. But everything that has happened thus far serves as a sobering lesson to society. Proximity does not equal safety, and trust, when misplaced, can be as dangerous as any weapon. If you believe content like this matters, please consider subscribing to our channel, turning on notifications, and sharing this video. Every click helps amplify the truth, and every share raises awareness. Together, we can shine a light on the cases that demand justice and never let the silence bury the victims.